Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. Joe Biden plans to restore the world back to the safe climate of the past. So let's go back 250 years to mid-November 1771. On Sunday morning, the 17th of November, about 2 o'clock with the wind at east, the inhabitants of Newcastle were alarmed with the most dreadful inundation that ever beset that part of the country. The water in the River Tyne rising 6 feet higher than the remarkable flood of the year 1763. This is what the Newcastle Bridge looked like after the November flood of 1771. And note they had a similar flood in 1815. 1815 was a very busy year. This is what Providence, Rhode Island looked like during the Great New England Hurricane. This is what Joe Biden considers to be a safe climate. 100 years ago, H.L. Mencken said, "On some great and glorious day, the plain folks of the land will reach their heart's desire at last, and the White House will be adorned by a downright moron." We've achieved that goal now, but let's go back again 250 years. This is Thomas Jefferson's notebook from 1771. He reported on May 26, 1771, the greatest flood ever known in Virginia. That record still stands. About 150 people were killed as the river reached a flood stage of 45 feet above normal. A contemporary of Jefferson wrote, "In 1771 and 1772, all the great rivers of this country were swept by inundations never before experienced, which changed the face of nature and left traces of violence that will remain for ages." 1771 was a pretty brutal year on both sides of the pond. On the Roanoke River, the 1771 flood is cited as 9 feet above the previous all-time high mark. At Osborne's, about 10 miles below Richmond, the water level reached 5 or 6 lengths of shingles upon the roofs. June 6, 1771, the Virginia Gazette. From Richmond, we learn that they received daily accounts of the devastation occasioned by the late floods. July 3, 1771. At the late flood at Virginia, numbers of houses were seen floating in the water with the inhabitants on the tops. All the ships were drove onshore from their anchors but were got off again. There was a lot of bad flooding going on, and that was also the worst period for hurricanes. The 40 years surrounding the Revolutionary War had 9 of the 35 deadliest Atlantic hurricanes. You can see the Revolutionary War spike here, and the only other period of time that came close to that was the 1930s. The deadliest Atlantic hurricane occurred in 1780. The storm destroyed every single building in Barbados, and the 200-mile-an-hour winds stripped the bark from the trees. British Admiral Rodney wrote that the wind carried aloft 100 feet the heavy cannons of the ground fortifications. The deadliest Atlantic hurricane occurred in 1780, and the third deadliest Pacific typhoon occurred that year as well. About 100,000 people died, as was vividly reported by the press at the time. A favorite argument of climate alarmists is that people just weren't very smart back then and didn't know to get out of the way of hurricanes and typhoons. According to climate alarmists, the problem wasn't the 200-mile-an-hour winds or the water levels up over the roof, but rather just that people weren't as intelligent as they are now. So let's take a look at what the actual typhoon trends are. These graphs of Japan Meteorological Agency data were prepared by my beautiful wife, Kyrie. She does a lot of valuable research for Pierre Gosselin's No Trick Zone. Over the past 70 years, there's been a downward trend in the number of typhoons that formed. And it's the same story in Australia. This graph is from the Australian Bureau of Meteorology. It shows that the number of severe and non-severe cyclones in Australia has dropped sharply over the past 50 years. But Joe Biden says he's going to take us back to the climate of the past when we had a lot more typhoons. Toto can wager a guess what Thomas Jefferson would have thought about the current occupants of the White House. This country was founded by brilliant men and is being destroyed by complete idiots. You can visit Toto, Kyrie, and Caesar on the web at realclimatescience.com.